Let's talk about the Earth as a whole and all the systems of Earth. This is a very complicated discussion, and let's preface it with a comparison. If you wanted to work on a car engine, you wouldn't just go out and start tearing into it if you didn't know anything about any of the parts or how any of the systems of a car engine work together. So I like to think of the Earth as more like a car engine. It makes for an easy comparison. If you look at a diagram of a car engine and you're trying to fix it, you don't know much about the parts names or what they do, you could have a diagram in front of you and you can have arrows pointing to all the parts, and you might take some guesses at what that does and how that impacts something else in the engine. But if you took one of the things off, the whole engine might stop working. It's the very same for the Earth. We want to study Earth systems and all the moving parts, learn their names. Also talk about how they work together and how the disruption of one part might impact the entire other parts that are trying to work together. So just because you have a diagram of the Earth in front of you and a lot of arrows and a lot of things named out for you, it doesn't really give you all the information that you need to make informed decisions as citizens of the planet Earth. So in this course, we definitely want to talk about those and learn the names of those. But let's take an overview of Earth systems and look at the whole picture first. When we talk about Earth systems, we take a holistic approach, which what that means is we look at the whole. Now we will break down and look at some of the systems individually and look within those systems. But as we look at the holistic view of the Earth, we look at the atmosphere, we look at the lithosphere, we look at the water on the planet. We look within the lithosphere, what's happening to the inside of the Earth. How are things moving around on the Earth? How are things interacting on the Earth? We also talk about matter and molecules, organisms, populations, interaction of species. We'll talk about all the abiotic components of the planet, the non-living portion of the planet. This helps us understand how systems might interact with each other and with us to make the Earth what it is and it function like it does. One system that you're going to hear a lot about is ecosystems. An ecosystem is the basic unit of the environment. It is a system in which individuals live and interact with the non-living portion of the environment. Talk about chemistry, we talk about cycling of matter and the flow of energy through ecosystems. So an ecosystem is a system, but it's a basic system of ecology. Ecosystems provide valuable services for humans. Some of those services are soil formation, water purification, air purification, breakdown of pollutants, nutrient cycling, pollination. Human society is dependent upon ecosystems and their functions and their services. When talking about systems, you have to talk a little bit about feedback loops. Feedback loops are loops that occur in nature and can be broken down into two divisions, positive and negative. It's important to note when talking about a feedback loop that if I say positive feedback loop or negative feedback loop, that doesn't mean that they're good or bad. Positive means one thing, negative means another, but it doesn't mean either is good or bad. A feedback loop is a circular process in which a system's output serves as an input to that same system. Let's talk about negative feedback loops. A negative feedback loop is defined as a feedback loop in which the output of one type acts as an input that moves the system in the opposite direction. The input and output essentially neutralize each other's effects, stabilizing the system. Compare that to a positive feedback loop. A positive feedback loop is a feedback loop in which the output of one type acts as an input that moves the system in the same direction. The input and output drive the system further toward one extreme or another. Most systems in nature are negative feedback loops. Typically, if there's a disturbance or something happens, the negative feedback loop occurs in which the system eventually returns to its normal state. Examples of this are body temperature, homeostasis. If you get sick, you may develop a fever. The fever helps drive the sickness from your body, and eventually your body returns to its normal state and normal temperature. This is an example of a negative feedback loop. In a positive feedback loop, instead of returning to a normal state, the input drives the system further and further from its normal state towards an extreme. Exponential growth in humans, populations, erosion, melting of sea ice, these are all examples of positive feedback loops. They're rare in nature normally, but they're very common in natural systems that have been altered by humans. In this example, positive feedback loop, as climate warms, humans buy and use more air conditioning, which results in more output of CO2. An increased output of CO2 actually causes the climate to warm more and results in more buying of air conditioning and using of products that produce CO2, driving the climate warmer and warmer. In this example of the human population, an increase in births increases the population. An increase in population increases the number of births. Increase in births increases the population, driving the population higher and higher towards an extreme. Again, a positive feedback loop. Erosion is another example of a positive feedback loop. If erosion is allowed to continue, it will get worse and worse and worse towards an extreme until something happens. So, as you can see, systems are perceived in various ways. Understanding feedback loop helps us understand the holistic view of the Earth and also helps us understand how things can function correctly and incorrectly going forward.